Actually working for child support and, well, I was working for a private company that managed the child support office, but actually working for the actual child support office was about 8 years. For about 17, 18 years, I've been a child support professional. No, I worked for a company that managed the child support office. It first started, it was Maximus, and they're a huge government contractor with contracts all around the world. And Policy Studies is another company that I worked for that managed the Baltimore City Office of Child Support Enforcement, where I gained my experience. When I started my business, We Are Parents, about 6, 7 years ago, I was actually invited on it's not syndicated anymore, but the Michael Basin show. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And I was on his show, and that's when I got a lot of exposure and started getting requests from all around the country. And it was pretty alarming. Yeah, I'm going to use the word alarming. It was alarming because most of the men didn't have issues with child support. They didn't have a problem paying their child support or the child support system. It was the ability to be able to access their children and see their children.
They said 70% of the ones that defaulted or were behind, I think they made less than 15 or 20,000 a year. Most of the ones that struggled just didn't have much of an income, if any at all. Is that correct in your knowledge or no?
Well, I'm not familiar with the statistics, but just based on my experience, that definitely sounds accurate.
So this whole myth that the deadbeat dads and all this other stuff. So if guys in general have a legitimate income, you find it rarely, most of the time, the issue is not that they're not trying to provide financially for their kids. That's not really the true narrative.
No, it's being able to see their children, because unfortunately in America, and this is another thing that I think legislation needs to be proposed. Unfortunately in America, the system has no problem accessing or reaching out to the non-custodial parent, which is a lot of times the man, the dad, has no problem reaching out to them to get them to monetarily support their child. But you have to take an extra step and actually petition the family court in order to have consistent visitation, or, well, I don't even want to use the word visitation, child access or access to your children.
So now visitation, that was actually a term at some point on paperwork, right?
Yeah, and still a lot of states, a lot of less progressive states as Maryland, they still use the term visitation. Maryland's a more progressive, which is why they stopped using the word visitation and use the word child access now.
That's crazy. Like the non-custodial, so the custodial parent just simply means that who the child is physically with.
Custodial parent, who the child is physically with. Non-custodial parent is who the child is not currently with or physically with.
And the system called that parent, they went from a parent to a visitor.
Yeah, well, let's backtrack. When I first had my internship, when I was first exposed to the child support office in maybe 94, 95, the term wasn't non-custodial parent, it was absent parent. Custodial parent and absent parent.
Wow.
Which is demeaning. And I remember even asking, as an intern, I remember asking my supervisor, what do they mean absent? Like, absent means that you're not around at all. Like words have meaning. And I mean, just think about how that transcends subconsciously into someone's psyche. If you're a man out here struggling or whatever, and they're calling you an absent parent.
The Bible repeatedly talks about the significance of words and taming the tongue because of words, and the life, there's death and life in the tongue. So words is life and death. So I completely agree with you.
And depending on your upbringing, it may be a subconscious excuse for you to be an absent parent and not have to be in your child's life.
Because they called you from the break that absent.
You're absent, you're not there.
One of the interviews, the episode just before you, the third episode, the episode just before you, she talked about how she forgave $30,000 worth of child support debt because she just saw what it did to her son. And she said, I refuse to plug my child into that. Another post I just saw that said it was a sister who had maybe 40,000 followers or following 40, and she was talking to the women, and she said, if you struggle with submission, you're deceitful because you're submitting to somebody. If you're not submitting to a man or partner with a man to raise your child, then you have to submit to the government and the child support office and submit to their terms and do what they tell you. So if you don't learn to work together and submit together or to one another, you will submit to somebody else. And she said The other young lady said on average, she got less. Everybody got less the moment that they plugged their family into the system. She said she got less. I think I saw an article that said about 75% of the men said that they would have even given more than what the system required had she had just sat and worked with, that they worked together. Do you agree with that at all?
I definitely agree with that, because a lot of times when you're being told what to do, you're naturally on the defensive. When someone's telling you what to do, whether it be a judge or an administrative office like child support, when you're being told what to do, you're naturally on the defensive. But when you can mediate and come up with an agreement with that person, I mean, and of course we know it doesn't happen in a lot or every situation, but when you can mediate and come up with an agreement with that person, you're more likely to follow through with that agreement when you're not being told what to do, but when you're working with the person and you're mutually deciding on what the two of you can do together.
It's so crazy, because that's about 7 passages I can think about that even in the Bible that addresses bringing people to court. And often even the scriptures tell people who follow the Christian faith, or even the Muslims that follow the Holy Quran, it talks about reconciling before you go, to make sure you guys do what's in the best interest of you. So I'm assuming this is all right. This is all new to me. This is kind of shocking. So I'm gonna catch myself and digress from keep on going. You mentioned earlier that you believe that this is today's biggest civil rights issue. Now, Candace Owens said, as on the Republican side, that the greatest threat to the Black community right now is fatherlessness, absentee fathers. Says there's nothing more of an atomic bomb to our ability to create wealth, to excel, to grow. And then you said, this is our civil rights issue. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I truly believe, just as I stated to you earlier, I truly believe that parenting is the civil rights issue of our time. And let's just ask ourselves this question. If you look at the murder rate in Baltimore City, or I don't know the last time you've been on a Baltimore City bus, you can't tell me that increased fatherhood or the lack of fatherlessness has a direct impact on how these young men act.
Brother, listen, they said there are close to 3,000 kids right now that are homeless in public schools. And they said the number one reason is the disconnect from fathers. They did a survey and they asked, what was the number one reason for the disconnect between the child and the father? And I think 81% of the women said the disconnect started with me, right? The women said the disconnect between this child and their father, 81% of them, maybe more, maybe less, fessed up and said, I am the reason this thing stopped, this connection. Baltimore Sun came out with an article that said, I think 91% of the homeless people in Baltimore and throughout Maryland is connected to fatherlessness. Another article said that the little girls, the teenagers, are 4 times, it's a 300 to 600% greater chance that your daughter's life is completely derailed by having a child as a teen just because you removed her from father. Then it said the chances of the mother's boyfriend molesting the child or other men that's in her space raping or molesting the children go up, I think, by 500%, just because they see there's no father to protect the child. The gangs, I think they said it was 95% of the gang-related areas, the BGs, the guerrillas, all of the guys were connected to the fact that the father had been disconnected. I think they said when the fathers are disconnected, they're 8 times more likely to commit suicide. The children, I think it was 16 times more likely to develop a mental illness before they're 10. I'm talking about this, but you're on the front lines, right? So this is all new to me, but this is just you see. I mean, so and I tell people in the Quran, I think it's about 70%, but in the Bible, 90% of all scriptures from historians or scholars, biblical scholars, about parenting is specifically to the father for 2,000 years. Proverbs 17:6 says the crown of a grandparent is the grandchild, but the honor, the identity, and I forget the other word, of a child comes from the father. Do you think our attitude towards fatherhood in America is toxic?
Very good question. Very good question. I think you would have to really break that down socioeconomically based on the different demographics. Because culturally, I would say different demographics view fatherhood differently. So, I mean, we're going to, speaking specifically about the African-American demographic, I absolutely think that at times fatherhood is viewed with a certain level of toxicity. So, I mean, I absolutely would agree with that. And it's really like one of the things is, okay, well, what can we do about it? Like every inner city, we'll just take Baltimore City because it's pretty, paramount nationally of what's actually happening in Baltimore City. It's like, okay, if we know that fatherlessness is an issue, one, we have to think of, okay, what can we do to increase the level of fatherhood in these homes? But if we can't do that organically, then we need an influx of something to be able to capture the hearts and souls of these children. So one of the things that I personally think needs to be done is I think there needs to be an after-school program implemented nationally. I do not know where the money's coming from. Me personally, I'm, not really too reliant on always relying on the government, especially around this time, what we're dealing with now. I think there's definitely enough private money out there to be able to assist with, some of these ideas. But there needs to be some type of after-school program. And no disrespect to the single mothers out there, because they're busy, working 1-2 jobs, trying to hold it down, take care of their family. They could have, maybe 2 or 3 sons at home or whatever the case may be. A lot of times we know that they're not getting it organically at home. So responsible people need to step in to make sure that these children are getting the building steps. Because it really starts, when you think about it, by the time a child gets to middle school, now I've worked as a DJ, as group home manager in the past. I've, mentored children in Baltimore City schools. I've done it all. By the time they get to middle school, it's already too late sometimes.
It's too late.
It's too late.
They mentally,
so that's why I think
they are developed as an individual. Absolutely.
Start kindergarten, first grade, start getting to their minds, the hearts and minds of the children at that age. And of course, you're not going to, eliminate all crime or all drugs or anything to that effect. But you could take a percentage, even if you could take 10 to 15% to decrease the numbers by that much. We're going to steer these children in a different direction. And I know I'm going off on a tangent.
No, it's perfect. But Wisconsin, I've been studying states. Wisconsin has a best interest of the child law. And they have, I wish I could read it. I think I may have it to read it. But if you want a divorce, and I look at, let me start with the crime in Wisconsin versus Maryland. They're right now averaging 4 violent crimes per every 1,000 people, right? Now, is that a race issue? I think the stats going, Jay-Z says, right, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. 4 violent crimes per 1,000 people. And in some of the areas are even better. Maryland has, I think, 38 crimes per 1,000 people. Literally 10 times more. Baltimore is averaging 64 more violent crimes per 1,000 people. The article said it is a direct connection to fathers. Our attitude and how abusive we are towards fathers. The rule in Wisconsin says if you want a divorce, this is automatically the rule. You have to, I wish I could get the article to read it here, but they said if a mother, husband and wife, you both have to prove you can work. We're not going to start taking money off the government. We're not going to start gouging each other. We're not going to start being vindictive towards each other. both of you have to, I think in a certain, maybe 30 days, to get together, create a plan on how you're going to co-parent the child together, right? Get a mediator, together talk about the child's school system, how they're going to be educated, how you're going to parent them, the days that you both are going to share them, right? They said if you even bring up all your emotions and the relationship, you're going to have a problem, right? That has, for the sake of this child, we won't even grant, this is for the divorce, you know? So before, and if you want to move outside of the state, that's a whole separate meeting. We got to come back together. But you guys need to, where both of you going to live in relation to the child. It says before the judge will make a custody and a visitation order, parents must attend court-sponsored mediation session to try to reach a custody agreement. If they are unable, each parent must submit proposed custody and visitation plan to the judge. The plan must state the parent's proposed custody and visitation schedule, where the parents live, the plans to live, where they plan to live for at least for the next 2 years, where the parent works, including a proposal about where the child is going to school, who will provide child care when the parents are unavailable, basically y'all work schedules, right? How y'all gonna work together to make sure you got the child, and what doctor will provide medical care. The post plan should also state how holidays, vacations will be divided between parents, how medical and other expenses will be paid, and who will make decisions about the child's education, Medicare, religious upbringing, extra curricular activities. Finally, I mean, I can go, but they said, listen, before we even grant this, we need to hear your plan. There was a woman in here who said, if it wasn't for she said, kind of like you said, if we're not going to do it organically, she said, and I wasn't ready to do it organically. It was a white sister. And she said, I was ready to tear up everything. She said, if it wasn't for our court systems, I would have she said, I would have seen in hindsight what I would have did to my 2 sons, what I would have did to their father, and what I would have did to myself. They said the malicious syndrome, I think the women are 5 to 6 times more likely to develop a mental illness. So I completely agree with you that the law has to step in. There's a rule of thumb I used to always say on my record label with my band, that we're going to set up structure in our right mind. So if we ever go in our wrong minds, we have something to hold us to.
You have that blueprint.
And I feel in Baltimore, there is completely different. It's whoever the more emotional person that is studying the policies and the law to use it to work in their favor. That's what the law is for. And if they want to be vindictive and mutilate these kids and the kid, they can't, because it's really on whoever comes in. It's almost like whoever comes in first with the victim story, male or female, whoever has the best one, whether it's true or false, has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of the other kids. So I believe that violent crimes are not going to go down in Baltimore or major cities, Chicago. It's going to continue to go up. Matter of fact, I was going to quote 2 scriptures. What God pretty much lets us know, doing that to the children, what I would do to you. I think Luke 17:2 says, it's better for you to tie a noose around your neck, tied to a big stone, and slide it off a boat. It's better for you to do that to yourself than what I have for plan for you for making one of these little ones' heart dark. So I can go on and on about God's hearts, about children. You know, Black kids are right now leading all other groups in suicide. I think there's a little girl, I think she was in the 3rd grade here in Maryland recently. I think it was a little girl, maybe between 8 and 10. It just enraged me, man. Because I feel like the interview I had, the first one I had was 4 daughters talking about how their mom took them from 4 state lines. And I asked her, do you feel like, she said, the church didn't help me. The people didn't help us. She lied, she did this. And I'm not making it just about the woman, right? Because I get in most cases, I think when we talk about car thieves, we should bring up men a lot because they're dominant violators of breaking in cars, right? 86% of child trafficking victims or the victimizers are men, particularly white men, right? So I think having a discussion around the men It's good. And I think when it comes to justice, you need to address the group who's the biggest violators, not based on whether they're men or women. That's pointless. Objectively as well, who's violating morally the most this thing? Who's, you know what I mean? Like, and so right now, they're saying the majority of the people that are taking advantage or statistically seems to be the women. Obviously, but I'm sure you worked there and you saw it could be anybody.
Oh yeah.
But in general, there doesn't seem to be a culture to protect the kids. You shared, I think you shared, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that child support is actually not government. It's a private sector of business, quotas and numbers. And is that a?
Well, it's privatized.
Privatized.
Just like any other state contract. Yeah, it's a request for proposal that goes out to different private child support contractors that bid to manage the child support office. Now, this is just for Baltimore City. Every other child support jurisdiction in Maryland is run by the actual state government.
But in Baltimore City?
Yep, Baltimore City for the past 17, 18 years.
Is a private company.
And I'm sure when I named the first company that used to manage the office, the first company that actually won the contract, I'm sure you may be familiar with the company, and you may be asking yourself, wait, they ran child support? Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is the first company to win the Baltimore City child support contract. But if I can go back to some of your prior points, Maryland's pretty good. Maryland kind of does the same thing where if you petition for child access in Maryland, the first thing they're going to do is send you to mediation. They're going to say, try to work it out amongst yourselves. And then if you can't work it out amongst yourselves, then you come back to court. So Maryland's good in doing that. Okay. However, going back to your Wisconsin point, the issue with our people primarily is we're not married. Our children are being born out of wedlock. So that is a great, and I commend Wisconsin for that. But we're not talking about divorces here. We're talking about a young, it could be a young man, or quite frankly, a man my age. I'm 45 years old. A man my age, let's say making $15 an hour, and something happened, I can't see my child or whatever. I have to take off work to go to the family court and pay $165 to file a petition. And this is like for the people that can't afford attorneys. I mean, this is just the baseline of what you can do. I have to pay $165 to file a petition to see my child. Then I either have to pay another $40 to have the sheriff serve the custodial parent, or ask one of my friends or family, getting them involved and maybe straining the relationship to get the custodial parent served in order to even get it into court to be able to see my child. So basically, like right now, if I don't have a child support order, and right now the mother of my child decides, you know what, you can't see Cameron. That's my youngest son's name. You can't see Cameron anymore. It would probably take me about a good 3 to 4 months if I follow all those steps, 3 to 4 months, in order for me to be able to get in to see my child. And which is why one of the things that we plan on doing is working with senators like Charles Sidnor and have it a law enacted where once you have a relationship with that child support office, while we're figuring out what this child support amount is going to be, automatically address child access.
Right.
And not have to have that man take that next extra step of taking off work, right, filing this petition,
right,
getting it served. Like, right, who knows about this stuff? I have to find out about this stuff on my own. Who's going to think about that when you're just trying to pay your bills or whatever? And it's the whole premise of it's the start that stops you. A lot of times we know, I've done this in the past, we're just going to keep on playing that victim role and talking to our friends and family about it.
You said it's just the start that stops you.
Yeah, it's the start. But who's going to have the wherewithal, the fortitude? You got all these other issues, and you may not even have that support or education to even know how to do this. Do I Google how to see my child?
Now, this is where you guys come in, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm telling everybody, weareparents.org. This is where he comes in. Bro, make sure people pronounce your first and last name correctly. Can you say it?
Yes, Keno Stevenson.
Keno Stevenson. This brother is an amazing advocate in the tri-state, but really servicing the nation, correct?
Yes, we don't, well, I have a supervising attorney agreement where we can actually assist people with petitions in the state of Maryland.
Okay.
But anybody that has a question, I will point them in the right direction. I don't care if it's an overseas potential client. I will point them in the right direction to figure out how they can see their child.
Oh, awesome. And I think that is a civil right issue. That's the parent. Because I even read in one of the legal documents, it said that even if there's a domestic case, that has nothing to do with the parenting. So if y'all domestically can't get along, the arrangement could be where you meet somewhere in public and there's a third party that helps you guys, but the parenting relationship is different. Would you agree with that or no?
Well, can you restate the question? So
I was reading the article because anybody can now claim domestic. You know, I was in one organization, I won't call the name, they got about 60-something thousand men. I was in another organization that has almost 800,000 men. And on two different instances, the men said, hey, one guy said, I'm an engineer, never been in a physical altercation in my life, and I was just slapped with a restraining order for physical abuse. Can any of you guys relate? I almost started, I didn't know how to feel. One had 60,000. I think I had read, I stopped because I was trying to do the search words to count them. It was maybe, I don't know how many thousands of brothers, but I had stopped at the percentage. It was 92 or 93%, some crazy number. Had said, the same thing happened to me. No, they said the first text, the number one text that they got was you'll never see your kid again. That was the number one text. You're not gonna see your child again. Which blows my mind that any human being could think that they can invoke that power over another human being, right? And then the other response was, I'm gonna get you for abuse. That's what it was. It was a second one. And I'm thinking, each time I'm trying to go to their page to look at these guys' careers, because I'm like, well, maybe they were felons or bad. I'm looking at nurse practitioners, engineers, doctors, police officers, postal workers, pastors. I'm like, these are the middle-class American men, went to school, got a degree, took care of their mamas, regular guys that were plugged into a system and made or deemed a criminal strictly from this system and stripped of their ability to father their kid.
Well, I mean, I guess every situation is different. But quite frankly, I probably would have to have some pushback on that.
Okay, go ahead.
And the reason why, this is from personal experience.
Okay, go ahead.
In '95 is when I had my first child, my oldest. And the mother and I decided that, we're not going to be together. And, it was emotional and everything to that effect. And we actually got into an altercation because 3 months after my son was born, I went to a party at Towson University and I saw her there. And I'm like, who's watching our son? And I had been drinking and everything like that. So I pretty much told her, like, no, you can't party. You're just going to stay in this little corner area and you can't party. Okay. So then I was charged with false imprisonment and assault and battery. And this is like around the O.J. Simpson time. So I had a high bail and, I was able to get out and went to court and everything. And I had a non-trespassing order. I couldn't go on Towson University property at all. So I said, that's not going to prevent me from seeing my son. So what happened was, we had a conversation. Like,
hold on. So you ready to go teach guys right now that don't connect the two? Is that what you're going to teach us?
Actually, when I'm about to teach you, it's like, they're two different things. Two different things.
Two different things.
Two different things because
in your head, disconnect them for the second.
Disconnect.
Go ahead.
So then what happens is,
teach us something, brother. Go teach us.
She lets me in. She lets me in the dorm room. My son was in there. Smelled like he needed to be changed. She brings out a pamper. She brings out some powder.
This is with the restraining order.
No. This isn't. I just couldn't set foot on Towson University property.
Okay. Got you. Okay, go ahead.
So then I'm changing them. She goes back in her room. Next thing I know, there's a knock at the door, and it's Towson University police, and I get arrested because I wasn't supposed to be there, even though she let me in and everything like that.
Okay.
So that's when I realized I had to take the step. At the time, it was called visitation. I had to take the step to petition for visitation.
Hold up. How did they know you were there?
She called them.
Okay, go ahead.
She called them. I mean, the reason why I wanted to share this is because there wasn't a restraining order, but there was a false imprisonment, assault and battery. But when I went to court, that had nothing to do with me being able to see my child. So
teach us, brother.
I think a lot of times, I mean, as men, we try to conflate certain issues, and a lot of times it's easier for us to say what the problem is instead of coming up with a viable solution of, okay, the focus is how can I see my child? And lastly, I say all that to say, unless there's some serious abuse, some child abuse, or some serious domestic violence, documented domestic violence against that woman, I would say in most jurisdictions, I know maybe some conservative jurisdictions may be different, but 9 times out of 10, that's not going to affect your ability of being able to have some type of child access arrangement with your child.
What did you study at Morgan? You went to Morgan State, right?
Yes.
So what did you study there? Political
science.
Okay. So let's so I want guys to be sober, and because you're educating us, but the average guy is not going to, because there's a couple different layered things about you that I want brothers to understand on why they can learn from you. They need to call you, but it's not going to be most of our first choice. You grew up, number one, with both your parents.
Yes.
And they were advocates themselves.
Yeah, and I pretty much grew up not to take no for an answer.
And you grew up in a predominantly upper middle class white neighborhoods, but you still would have these kind of abolition or the parents that, because did they march or something like that, or?
Oh, they're still marching. They live in Florida, and they were marching for Trayvon Martin. They still at it. They're at what, 74 and 75 right now.
So for most of us with indentured servant or slave or whatever mentality we may have, right? They always say, how do you train a flea? You know, a flea can jump 18 inches, but you put it in a jar and you put holes in it for 3 days to a week, and you take the jar off, it'll never jump past that. And it'll teach the other flea children to never jump past it either. I think they could be 5 or 6 generations. Yeah, they could be 5 or 6 generations and never go, the lid is gone. But I think, so the Bible says in Proverbs, train a child in a way they should go. When they're old, they won't depart. It's programmed. So I think when we sell this fear, especially since welfare, you're talking about the past 45 years, they said 220 million Americans are affected from that epidemic out of the 327 million. So that's almost 66, almost 70% of the country comes from that. And so there is this fear that have been passed down like a flea program of this thinking about court systems, custody, child support, all of that stuff.
Institutional fear.
Institutional fear that you honestly weren't. And my mom is a professor at illustrious university. My father was a credible leader, opened the first black-owned music store. My grandfather kept all his kids together when his wife died, and he was NAACP and stood at the courts with no attorney and was able to fight and convince the courts at that time. And you're talking about the late 50s, early 60s, where it was illegal for a black man to have his children if his spouse died. You had to just plug him into the system. It was done. And he stood in the court. So I agree with you, being built by both parents.
Our mindset is different.
Our mindset is different. And so we've been built though. And so most guys, millions of casualties of these babies, I believe women teach children how to win, men teach them how to fail. And so I tell people, when you hear Kobe talk and Jordan talk, you hear most of the greats, they almost always talk about their father. And now it's going to be hard to beat that guy. He's been built, right? He's been developed. Why? Because men teach them how to fail. I believe men are the greatest component, just from what I studied in social science, neuroscience, of developing emotional intelligence for their children, right? Because if you don't know how to fail, you got rapes, you got murders, you can't stop doing twisted stuff because you don't know how to fail. You don't know how to hit no, you don't know how to take a L, right? And success is nothing but a long list of failures.
Long list of failures.
And so if your father never helped you to develop that emotional intelligence that the Bible talks about to be able to fail, the thought of a daunting system already and
that's why I go back to it's the start that stops you.
It's the start that stops you. So if your mom and your and if you if you are a son that grew up around a bunch of women and you didn't see the dad, and because they say the average father makes 4 to 8 legitimate attempts to connect with their kids, even the ones that program 4 to 8 legitimate before they just feel broken.
And the reason why it would behoove the Child Support Agency and the state of Maryland and the legislature to adopt a policy of addressing child access when you're addressing child support is because statistically, men that have to pay child support are more inclined to be in their child's life because there's a financial interest involved.
Unbelievable. I was in a relationship with a woman she was lying, but whose son wanted to see his father, and she gave me an amazing story. She didn't allow him to see his father for 5.5 years. And she would go in the room, and the boy would be scratching himself and beating his face and all kinds of stuff, asking her, can I please see my dad? I didn't know this until the end of the relationship. But she literally tortured this boy where he didn't get to see his father. The point I want to bring up, his father never missed the child support payment. When they finally got to reconnect, not only his father, but his new wife and all his entire household was suffering emotionally. So here's 2 groups suffering, and I would do whatever I can to try to the point where she called me and she said, hey, I'm here. His family came by to see him. If you tell me don't let him see me, I won't let him see him. I said, that's crazy. Let him see his son. But I was being, that's a whole separate video I want to talk about us as a community. We got to fight, even while these laws are being processed or being passed, to ask churches, every group, when we see children walking in our churches, our buildings, and we don't see the father, or guys coming through consistently, we don't see the mother, there has to be a social norm where our first question is, where are these children daddy at?
I've been in several relationships over the past 18 years. And once it starts really developing and we're at the point where we can ask those personal questions, that's the first question I'm asking.
Yeah, where's the
father? I'm doing everything I can to support it.
Absolutely.
With my current wife, I drove to Ohio just so she could spend the father of the weekend, and we drove back. We stayed in the hotel for that weekend.
Incredible. Bro, I spent $600,000 in 8 years fathering my stepson, and they say, no, you were his father. You're never his father. That's the Creator said it that way. You'll never be. They even gave statistics on the influence. They said one father is in Africa. They say one father is equal to 100 teachers, right? And I think the average person, even if you go to grad school, the most you're going to have is maybe 60 teachers. But the influence of their father is equal to 100 teachers. And so my attitude has always been, no, I'm the stepdad. No, you his father. Listen, it was even suggested, once you change his last name, I'm not doing that. If you do anything like that, he needs to keep that name attached somewhere. You do not, that child's father is it. So I just feel like I've heard so many people who are just cavalier with these babies' minds when it comes to the father. I would imagine you probably experience way more, because I've just been in the ministry for a decade, touring in music and being a mental health counselor. I've never been an advocate in the seat that you've been. I've never worked for child support. Have you seen that way more of a toxic issue or cavalier attitude about the child needing to be connected to their father?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, and another point I wanted to bring up, I'm also a mediator, and I've sat in on at least 15, 20.
Everybody write that down. So what is that? Are you legally? So if a couple wants to meet, whether they're married or not married, you're a mediator for them.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
But in the state of Maryland, it's governed under Maryland Rule 17, and there's different types of mediation. So you have to take an additional 20 hours to become a child access mediator that's recognized by the family court.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out, for the 15 to 20 child access mediations that I sat on, now you hear with this statistic I'm about to share, 100% of every mediation I sat on it was determined it was emotional. Once we allowed, I'm just going to put it out there, generally it's the woman, it was women. Once we allowed them to get their emotional stuff out and see past the emotional aspect, and let's start really thinking about the best interest of the child, that's when the mediation started to come together. And that's when both parties were able to leave the mediation like, okay, I feel comfortable about the direction that we're going in.
I've written 800 songs, and my whole career for almost 20 years was fighting for the women, not thinking about the children or the men. Not that I didn't, but as an R&B soul singer, it was for the women, my whole career. And now the rest of my career, most of my life, is fighting for the family. That whole happy wife, happy life thing is the most toxic quote. It's stupid to me. I think what's healthy is happy house.
When I see that.
I think I can't stand it. It's just so immature. It's a sign of a low emotional IQ to me.
So I'm supposed to suffer mentally because my wife's happy.
Right. My kid's supposed to suffer, so I believe it's happy house, happy spouse, right? Not happy wife, happy life. It's happy. Why? Because the scriptures in Romans tell us, and the Bible talks about in Ephesians, about submitting to one another, right? Even there's the direction on how to deal with the kid. Like there's a constant attitude with the Creator about a holistic approach about the family. Our attitude, America right now leads the world. I don't know if you know this. We lead the world in broken homes. Did you know that?
I can absolutely believe it.
Did you know?
If you look at how everything transpired historically,
it's almost a third of the nation is registered with some sort of mental illness. And they said the number one connection is America's attitude towards fathers.
Wow.
So the fact that you're calling this a civil rights issue, I don't think there's a better word that I've heard anybody use than what you just said.
I mean, because if you look at the bottom line, I mean, now granted, there's men out there that may not be thinking about seeing their children. That's a whole nother aspect because that's generational.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reason why it was a no-brainer for me is because I grew up with my father. Like, you ain't gonna tell me I can't see my son. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
But one of the things I do want to share, and I don't, of course I support fathers, but essentially I support parents, which is why the name of my company doesn't say fatherhood. It says we are parents.
That's right.
And one of the things I wanted to share, especially with the women out there, is I'm an objective person. So when I was managing the walk-in unit for Baltimore City, I would probably say I was much harder on the men that were coming in there. One, because I was a single father myself. And one of the things I used to share with the men, when they used to give me all the excuses of why they couldn't pay their child support, I would ask them, how are you taking care of yourself? How did you eat today? And a lot of times, I mean, excuse my use of profanity, I would see some of these dudes, you come in here looking sharp as shit, but you can't pay your child support? You got this leather jacket on and these new Jordans or these Timbs, and you can't pay your child support? And then another thing I used to share with the men that were coming in there, and the only reason they were coming in there is because we suspended their driver's license. That's the number one enforcement tool that the child support office has, is suspending driver's licenses. Because that's when it wakes a man up a lot of times and, let me go into this office and see what the deal is. I would tell them straight up, like, yeah, you do have some options. You think you're paying too much or whatever. And, I know there's like a mandated calculation the state of Maryland uses. I would tell them, well, there is an option. You can, petition the court for shared physical custody or custody. So you could be that primary person that's, responsible for taking care of your child. And I just wanted to share that because a lot of times, most of the speaking engagements I have and most of the interviews, it's geared toward fatherhood and, how the system does not support fathers. But overall, it's a consistent parental unit. Two people coming together to mutually shape this child. That definitely want to share that because a lot of times it seems like, the system's beating down on fathers, the system's beating down on fathers, the system's beating down on fathers. But we have to look at ourselves introspectively to see what some of the things as men that we're doing and we're not doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm finding that the guys who had their fathers who built them are way more sensitive to like, no, this ain't go. I feel like the ones who didn't have a father, now I know some amazing dudes who fathers were absent and they are and women who are advocates, because they know that what that devastated, like they know what that did. I find the more objective ones often are the ones who have both the mom and dad, and so they are not. I'm not here to bash women because my mother and my father divorced after almost 30 years of marriage. And the thing I thought was incredible is each time I would talk to my mother, she would say, well, what did your father say? And each time I would talk to my father, we would talk about whatever, and my father would say, wow, son, now what did your mother say? There was still this understanding that we are parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't like, boy, I'm gonna just argue. It wasn't just follow what I'm telling you or follow what don't listen to her. It was no. And I had one of my siblings had went off on my mom in a disrespectful way. They were already divorced for some years. My father drove to the house, made a family meeting, said, don't you ever, listen, as long as you live, that's your mother. And we are your parents. And so I think that's incredible. For that very reason, I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on this? It was brought to me by multiple people to bring to legislation that there should be a fine on that basis to the women who keep you from seeing a kid. One gentleman proposed a $500 fine. If I got to bring the police to your house, the police are also going to write a citation. Well, I think it was $500 or $250. The second time, no, first time was $250. The second time was for $500. And the third time was to be detained, right? Maybe a night in jail, automatically lose custody, primary custody, and your license is revoked until you are able to prove a plan on where you're going to co-parent. Their attitude was because there is no accountability if you want to do that to the child and disconnect them from the father's life could be inconvenienced because I think you even lost a position, a job, right? Somebody could cost you, because I'm giving you an example. There was one guy I know, he's an accountant, and he went to go pick up his son at the house. And when he got there, he brought the police because she wouldn't let him see his son. And she said, when the police got there, yeah, but his license is suspended or something, and there's something in his car. So they went to illegally search his car because it was on the premises, locked him up, and went to court. He was facing 15 years. The attorney called her, and he called her and said, you got to come in here and tell the truth. You can't send me to jail just because you didn't want me to see my son. Luckily, the police officer messed up on the stand and gave the wrong information because where the car was on private property and he wasn't supposed to. So it was all wrong. And he stumbled, and the attorney, jumped on it, and they dropped the case. If that police officer didn't stumble, this innocent dude would have been spending 15 years in jail. And so when they brought it up, I wanted to get your opinion on, do you agree with that? He said there should be a fine, not your ability to do that. And if the person is doing something lawful, unlawful, you can't. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, first and foremost, I would have to ask some more questions because there's already a similar law in place.
Okay.
If there's a child access order in place and that custodial parent or that mom violates that child access order, she can be held in contempt of court and she can face being detained. So there is a similar law in place, but the problem I alluded to earlier, there has to be an order already in place in order for that law to be.
So you have had the right that she's been doing this in place so they could say.
Well, there has to be a child, because think about it. I mean, are we talking about basically being able to show up at her house? Yeah, I want to see my child.
He had a scheduled time in a court order to see his son. It says time to see his son.
Yeah. There's already a law in place that says that that woman can be held in contempt of court. If you violate a child access order, you could absolutely be held in contempt of court. So in a situation like that, if the police don't enforce it, then you get it right back in the court, and you can ask her for legal fees, and you could ask her for filing fees, Yeah, you can absolutely get that right back in court. And if you want me to, I don't know it offhand, but I can actually share the part of the annotated code that that states that that woman could be held in contempt of court.
This is incredible because I just think there are millions of men that got to learn how to fight. Because I think,
and I have to state for the record, I'm not an attorney. I'm just basing on what I know and what I've actually read or whatever. But legally, I have to actually share that whenever I share something that's deemed as being legal.
I forgot where I was, but yeah, all right, cool. So look, man, all right, because of time, I want people to know what's the website, where do they go, what's a number they can reach you to get, because, oh, that's what I was gonna say. I think when the welfare system hit our communities and the child support system hit, I think, because even after slavery, blacks in general got married more than whites. We were leading, you couldn't catch us in our commitment to family. You just couldn't catch us. And for that reason, we started developing wealth in a unified way. Ecclesiastes says 2 are better than 1 because they get a better return for their work. It says when one falls, the other is there to help the other one up. But pity the person who has no one there to help them. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. So even in the Bible, in the scriptures, and the Quran addresses it in Surah 32, but that the unity of that family, it becomes very difficult to not create generational wealth, even if they're not married anymore, but they have a unified effort. So I'm imagining, and then you can tell me, is this a conspiracy theory, that it was understood that if we don't kind of demolish this, there's going to be a problem? Or do you think, because you said really the history of child support is not so much that, or what I'm saying, are they not connected?
Well, there's a lot of different ways I can answer that question. I mean, well, let's go back to figuring out what happened. I mean, because to your point, black people had no problem getting married. Grandparents, great grandparents. So what I see is what happened was, the breakdown of the black family structure came with incarceration. We're going to take that man out of the household, and then we're going to make you dependent on the state. And then once that man gets out of his incarceration, if he's able to get out of that incarceration, he's going to owe all that welfare money back to the state. And we didn't even address that aspect.
So they still racking up the money.
Women that get welfare, and when I say, well, let's stop using the term welfare. Let's be specific. TCA, temporary cash assistance, daycare vouchers, and payments like that. When women are receiving payments under those programs, the child support goes back to reimburse the state of Maryland for payments to support that family. And a lot of times, even if 2 parents, come together, like, we have to do this, I work here now and I got this stable job. I can give you $600 a month or whatever. Oh yeah, I have a job too. Yeah, we're working together now. And then, they start deducting the child support out to the check. That $600 is going to the state of Maryland. That's not going to that mom to take care of that household currently. That's going to reimburse the state of Maryland back for the money that it paid to take care of that household.
Essentially, it's a loan.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this is every state. This is every state in the country.
So you borrowing money.
Yeah, like you're borrowing money. If you're a man and you can't take care of your household at the time, the state will take care of your household, not to the extent, that it's needed. I'm sure it's not enough to, fully, compensate, taking care of the entire family. But yeah, that is a good point. I didn't even look at it like that. Yeah, it's basically a loan, and you got to pay us back for taking care of your family.
Sorry, if both of you guys are able-bodied and can work, just for the sake of your lineage, you shouldn't even plug into that.
Yo, absolutely not. Like, and I've dealt with, all types of clients where I tell them, like, nah, y'all may need to consider figuring this out amongst yourself, because if you get the state involved, man, you think you're going to get that $600, but nah, you're going to be calling the child support office and finding out where that $600 went that he paid because the 2 of you are cordial now. Nah, that went to the state, man.
So wow, now that we're willing to work together, So what if he starts working? The state's still gonna want that loan back.
Yeah. Well, and let's say she stops receiving benefits. Yeah, she may receive that current support ordered amount, but those arrears payments are going to go back to reimburse the state.
So we shouldn't even be plugging into it at all.
Yeah, I mean, but it goes back into a deeper problem. It's just the nature of relationships among, men and women, black men and women, of how we can't effectively communicate and support each other, and everything has to be, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And in my personal situation, I told, my youngest son's mother, after she got me fired from my job,
what?
I refuse to act ugly. I refuse to act ugly again because it's counterproductive.
What? Where were you working?
I was program manager of the Maryland New Hire Registry. I was essentially working in child support. That's another,
so you were
that's another component of child support.
Where was she working?
At child support. That's where we actually met.
Y'all were working at child support. So y'all had the jobs.
Yes.
And that was a disagreement about something between y'all.
I had said something rude to her, and I received a phone call at my office because we worked in the same office. She called me. I was like, and then she says, does your manager, Abraham, know you're trying to start your own company, We Are Parents? And I said, what does that have to do with anything? And as soon as I got off the phone with her, to be quite honest, I started putting all my files on the flash drive because I knew this was not going to end well.
So you lost your
Sure
position?
enough, then my manager came by, see what I was doing or whatever. I was like, yeah, everything's fine. And sure enough, I got that call at 4:45 p.m. When they're about to let somebody off right at the end of the day, they put me on paid administrative leave pending an investigation. But again,
so
I learned a lot, and I have great relationships. So any man that says, oh my God, she did this to me, she did that to me, we can never be friends, we can never be friends. Nobody can tell me that. Because my first son's mother had me locked up, and my second son's mother made me lose my job. And we're very cordial and very good friends with both of them now.
Did they ever apologize?
Oh yeah. She absolutely did. I mean, I don't remember my first son's mother, but I mean, it was so long ago in '95 or something like that. But yeah, my youngest son's mother absolutely did. And it's emotional. The two incidents, it was about emotions.
I'm gonna talk about it now, but because I'm gonna talk about a separate video on, because I tell everybody, if you ever want to study the darker part of ourselves, like where we can go, I always tell people study serial killers. That's kind of the darkest part of humanity. That's kind of the darkest part of a man or the darkest part of a woman. And sorry I use scriptures a lot, but there's a passage in the Bible that says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? It says, is it not that you just didn't get what you wanted? That's what causes a fight. You ain't get something you wanted. And then it starts giving specific commands on how you need to taper your temper, right? And your rage and all that stuff. But if you don't, I was studying on what men typically do when we go to a dark place and women. So I looked at serial killers. Men in nature want respect. The Bible addresses a lot about the need for a man to be respected. So when we go to a darker place, men starts demanding respect. If we're at a healthy place, we earn it. If we're at a dark place, we demand it, right? And so typically a serial killer, a male serial killer, they said in what I was reading in the research, they will kill, a lot of times rape, enforce their, what they want is respect, and leave a brand behind, an X on the leg, an ace of spades, something they will leave behind. Then they tend to go home, turn on the local news, and they see how much people are talking about their work for this dark, sick angle of respect, right? They say women serial killers are different. When a woman is going to a darker part of herself, when she's at a healthy place, she surrenders control. When she's at a dark place, she demands it. She replaces love for control. And they said a female serial killer, when she kills, that she often lays beside the body and watch them die. Right? So And they said, I think 60% of them were in the mental health field and the health field when they researched the women serial killers. So I notice when I see men going into a darker place, even on the streets, gangs, it's almost this word of, he disrespected me. She disrespected me. And the disrespect can often swell us. And I notice when women are at a dark place with God or life, the darker they get, the more they don't care what carnage is there with the children, the men. I want control. And I think, to your point, I think it needs to be civil rights stops that minimize, because right now I feel like there are many stops for man to go to demanding control. And I think it should be, and it has been throughout the years. I feel like in this new civil rights wave, we haven't had stops to give for women to go to that darker place for control. You know, you'll never see your child, and this is not, this is a dark place. And the challenge, I believe, where's the accountability for your side? Like, we should have it for our side. I think everybody should. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I was going to say, I mean, it's really human nature when you think about it. I get attacked, I get slighted, I get disrespected. And I'm just going to put it out there just based on my experience, from what I've seen. It usually boils down to, he cheated on me, or he doesn't want to be with me. And what leverage do I have?
Control.
The only leverage I have in order to gain some type of respect back or some type of payback is my child. He don't want to be with me. He ain't thinking about me no more. So the only way I can be in this circumference or get some type of dig back at him is to use the child as leverage. And then he has to take some extra hoops, which is essentially money that can potentially be used for the child, whether it be for a sport, not even actual child support payment, sport, outfit, some report card money, has to jump through the hoops to gain access, to break down this leverage that she's using to gain access to be able to see their child. And I mean, and again, to your point, I mean, you're giving actual stats to overall people. You're not talking about this man here, this woman here, whatever. And essentially, I'm just basing, what I'm sharing off of my experience.
Yeah, right.
They
you got real
use the
data.
child as leverage.
Yeah, you got real data. You got the real 17 years. How many people have you serviced in 17 years?
Well, my company, we probably service about 200 people in the past 8 years.
Now, because you're a free man, and you
so me personally, 200 people, but
yeah,
the child support office,
200 people unplugged from slavery, right?
Just hundreds.
But at the child support office, plugging people, because now what you're doing now is you're pulling people out of the system, and you're saying, "Let me help y'all learn how to be free." Correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before,
because I used to ask the question when I used to work at the child support office, there was the legal counsel there, because essentially it's the state's attorney of Maryland that is pursuing these child support orders. And I used to always ask the legal assistant of the state's attorney, like, why do people have to deal with the child support office? Why can't this be done privately? And I'm not even saying, right. I understand people aren't going to get along, but why does there have to be this bureaucratic agency that's responsible for addressing a lot of the things that we really need to come up with some type of better system to see how we can either help these people privately, or again, to my earlier point, if we support the child access aspect of it and not just the monetary aspect of it, everything will come together eventually. Because it'll be more about, I have a relationship with this child, so of course I'm going to want to take care of this child.
But
I'm probably going to want to do more than the support order amount. But if you have that disconnect and I don't have a relationship with my child, just like any other bill, like, no, I don't want to pay my bills. I mean, I'm saying that from a broad perspective.
No, because you also said the history of child support was men that weren't paying to take care of the child. But I'm imagining that was largely due to a mass incarceration. You locked all of these fathers up for whatever reason. You start finding these wonderful things, right? One law was after, I remember That were just so many sick laws. But one of the sickest laws I've ever heard is when slavery was abolished, it said, it gave one of the signs letting you know that if you can read this sign, now that slavery is abolished, is actually illegal, and you can get in trouble for reading the sign because you were able to read. They would just flip. I mean, it was just constant. Because I think, to me, white supremacy and all of it is just narcissism at the core. It's really dark. It's narcissistic. All the laws and all this stuff. So let me get back to the child support part of it. If you did this and then you let these men go, and there's this loan that needs to be paid back, essentially, now they got to find work, but now they got to work it, so they can't get work. Or they got menial jobs to pay back this loan because Uncle Sam is charging almost a third in taxes of income, right? Income taxes. So then there's not much left to survive. So then it creates this spiral where the kid has no idea what's going on. They just feeling completely unloved, right? Now you got women now with 2 and 3 or 4 different baby dads or whatever it may be, right? And then it's just, am I correct in that, in any of that at all? Or?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. But let me add something to the mass incarceration, because we're talking about child support. This child support system isn't just Black people and African Americans.
Sure.
It's everybody.
Sure.
So not just the mass incarceration aspect, and that may have had more of a detrimental effect on Black people, African Americans, but it started with Great Depression, and then the wartime. All the wars that we had, where a lot of men weren't coming home, either they were away at war or whatever. So these are all reasons why the child support system started, because not just Black men period, weren't coming home for whatever reason and taking care of their family. So it was like, okay, well, we need an agency responsible for handling that. And then started with the Social Security Acts. Social Security Acts Title I, Title 1A dealt with social services. And then you have Title 4E, which dealt with child support. Then you have Title 4D, which dealt with foster care. And the Social Security Act essentially came about as a result of being able to support families. And that's a whole nother tenet. In the actual Social Security Act, that governs child support, the states are supposed to be supporting marriages. It actually says it in the law. They're supposed to be supporting marriages and keeping families intact. But it morphed into this enforcement. Here's another thing I forgot to mention. When I was working there, it was called the Baltimore City Office of Child Support Enforcement. I mean, and even to myself, I didn't have a problem with that. Well, what's wrong with that? And it's like, well, wait a second. Enforcement means that something's not being done and it needs to be done. So just over the past few years, they took off the word enforcement. So now it's called the Baltimore City Office of Child Support. Again, to our earlier point, words have meaning. Words have meaning.
So it's almost like we created the same monster that everybody's complaining about. Like, and then essentially we have to have character enough to say, let's just work this out. Because
throw the whole system in the trash, and let's see what we need in 2020, not 1950, and figure out how to actually support these families and keep these families together.
Because, and I think another epidemic now is most of the children that come from homes where the father was disconnected, the girls are more likely to get in a relationship 2 times earlier. So you don't even get to process your brain. I think the brain doesn't even process till 25. So since you disconnect my father, I have low emotional intelligence as a male or female. So now I'm just trying to be loved by somebody, because this environment I could be toxic, right, or abusive, whatever it is, or lacking, or whatever it might be. And so I was wanting to start connecting to people. So now I have more children, and I create, because I didn't address that, and I have a mental illness likely, or some sort of something going on. And this person, because they probably didn't think productively, because another thing I talk to a lot of guys about is I tell a lot of the productive young guys, one of the big things that we got to do to combat this. Oh, well, let me go back to what I was saying. So I think it's just perpetuating a bunch more children out of wedlock because people are trying to grapple for something, which leads me to the conversation. House of Roof has a meeting for domestic violence where they have a meeting with the guys when they get in there, they talk about worthiness, which I think this is a horrible time to start training guys on worthiness when they got here, right? Because now they're fit for domestic violence, but you ain't want to teach that ahead of us. And basically, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase where you teach the men to look for a partner versus a project. I think one of the biggest challenges, they said that 2.5 million Black men that are affluent above the middle class level. That's about anywhere from 60 to 100 Black men per zip code. That's a lot of young, sharp brothers, right? Per zip code. Average zip code got about 20,000 people. And so 70 to 100 of them are ambitious, right? I mean, there's like other men, but these guys are kind of excelling, right? 2%, 3%. Those guys, 70, 80% of the time, pick a project. So they almost perpetuate, myself included. I've been married twice. I won't go into, but I know for me, I watch Hollywood, I watch TV, I watch this stuff. And if you're a young, productive male, you see Hollywood and this one, white woman, whoever the woman is, she throws a melon at a bad guy with a gun. And then the guy's walking by eating popcorn and he's ready to turn around and shoot her. And then this fool is running through the rest of the movie trying to keep her safe from all her poor choices, right? And so there's this narrative where we teach the men to look for victims, right? And so the girl that we were studying with in high school or college that was helping us with the homework, as a little boy, we taught you're not even a man or a good man at all unless you save somebody, unless you fixing somebody, unless you're searching for a project. You're not even a good American citizen. You're not even a hero. All in American movies and theaters, and we in there watching popcorn. Are we just inundating these sharp little boys? Save her, save her, save her, save her. So now you'll graduate college, and there's a girl that's magna cum laude, or she's sharp, and she has a healthy family, because forget whether she's sharp. She comes from something that's healthy. She's productive. She has high emotional IQ, the ability to share if something bother her, the concern, and then y'all talking, you can see that could be a potentially great partnership, but because for 16, 17, 18 years you've been programmed, the woe is me girl walks by with the tight jeans on, and you're like, something in you is like, I think it's noble of me to pick her. Not even knowing that's programming. You know?
Because you won't need your cake for the super professional.
No.
Professional woman.
But that's actually a partnership. That's a healthy choice, right? And I know you were talking about
that's interdependence right there versus the independent relationship that you may potentially have with the other woman.
Absolutely. And I know I had to go to therapy for codependence, savior syndrome, and messiah complex to be able to shift that thinking to say, am I picking a partner or a project? And where did I get this from? Where am I thinking from? Because I know dudes who are 60-something years old. They had 3 failed marriages, and they done lost all their savings. They say a man who picks a project versus a partner only accomplishes in general 25% of his potential, right? So I believe outside of your walk with God, your partner is the greatest choices you can make. And so one of the things I try to help young guys understanding that, hey, you can navigate through this, but your next choice is equally as important. You got to learn how to co-parent. But if you pick a good partner, she can be a great example for your children while you're co-parenting. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
And that partnership and watching y'all work together to get something accomplished can be a great example. So I would encourage a lot of guys that even listen to this to really pray, seek advice, maybe get therapy, even shift your thinking on, even if you still, like, that may have been toxic, but one of the things we got to stop doing is picking projects. As productive men, we got to say, listen, this is not, she could be your friend. You can listen to her. She can cry. I don't care how fine she is, right? It's like, listen, oh my God, you've been there for me. The kissing and like, listen, bud. In your head, this is a project, right? If somebody was homeless on the street, I'd give them a sandwich, I help them out. I'm not going to marry that person. I'm not going to make that person a life partner. This person is a project. They're not a good idea to build a life with. They find, and something in you that's been programmed to pick her. So I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but I think your services, the mediation, all of it sounds like you're helping with the self-worth and the value that we could get through the emotions and think bigger than that long term. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because I even look at like, and it was fostered from my own personal family relationships with my two sons that were born out of wedlock. Like ultimately, I'm blessed to be able to co-parent, effectively co-parent. And we're talking about both of them are currently married. But when it comes to things that involve my respective sons, they're having that conversation with me, not with their husbands. They're having that conversation with me. And because I was fortunate enough to be able to have these relationships and all the turmoil that I went through in the past, to be able to have these relationships, you know, with my son's mothers, of why I know that it's not the end of the world, and any relationship can change, and the status of any lack of child access can change. And I want to be able to support other families in that same manner, because there's really not too much, you know, men or women can tell me, well, he did this, he did that. Yes, there was cheating involved in my former relationships. Yes, one got me locked up. Yes, one got me fired. So you cannot tell me that things can't come together and the focus be the support of that child.
Brother, we definitely got to have you back on. I encourage everybody, weareparents.org. What are your normal work hours?
Generally 8 to 5, but I'm always available online. I have a Facebook page. I have 2 Facebook pages. One's specifically for non-custodial parent. It's a non-custodial parent support group. You can search it on Facebook and join it, become a member.
What is that? What is that? What is under what?
Well, if you just put in the search portion of Facebook, yeah, non-custodial parent support group. That's a separate page, and I also have a We Are Parents page as well.
Non-custodial parent support group.
Yeah, and in that group, I just talk about items specifically for non-custodial parents. Like one of the things that I'm really going to start pushing and perpetuating now is the fact that if you're a non-custodial parent and you have a child support order and you either lost your job or you were furloughed to the coronavirus, you need to give us a call so we can get that order modified so you're not responsible for that full payment when you can't make that payment along with millions of other Americans.
It's still a loan, like a credit card payment. Like you still owe it. And if you didn't call and modified and asked for some sort of adjustment, you just coming off as negligent. No different.
A child support is one of the only obligations where you can be incarcerated for non-payment.
Wow. So you can actually go to jail for it. So gentlemen, I hope this is incredible, and ladies, I want to take this time. I seen an article that said now there are a lot more men getting child. Right now I think it was it's almost 40,000 fathers at this point that have custody per state. So it's beginning to shift.
I think it's like 11%. I know that statistic is a few years old, but like 11%.
Yeah.
Of men have custody of their children.
Yeah. And what was I gonna say? I forgot what my ADD. Oh man, I forgot my point about. Oh, but it said that of the women, that women were. Now tell me, is just your experience? I read in the article they said the women are 3 times more likely to. I mean, they're likely to be 3 times more behind in child support than the men when they have to pay child support.
I'm not too familiar with that statistic, but I have, had more than a few clients and have seen information online and other various sources that for some reason it seems like women don't feel the need. Since the man's supposed to be the provider anyway, they don't really feel the need to pay the child support.
That's what I mean about accountability. This is exactly my point. It's like what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So now you're getting it. You're held accountable. And I saw it said it was like 2 or 3 times more in the rears than the men, like they 2 or 3 times worse than the guys. And I know at least 24 guys who have full custody. The one who was facing the time, and 2 of the children's mom, he said, I need some money to help. I said, boy, I ain't giving you nothing. And just one, but I know 24 guys, groups that I'm in, have said she's supposed to pay, she's not paying. And the men tend to be a lot more empathetic. Like, I'm not trying to really put her in jail. I'm not really trying to, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But I know you don't know the statistics, but you're seeing that when you were in there, the women, when they were put in the same system, they didn't fare to as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of our norms just come from society and what was done in the past. And just like I stated, I think it's just the mentality that the man's supposed to be the provider. The man's supposed to be the provider. Where why subconsciously they like, no, they don't, you know, some women don't think that they have to take care of their child. And we're talking about times when there's no child access order involved. So some of these women aren't even seeing their children and still don't feel like they need to support their children monetarily.
They're not seeing their kids, still not paying. And they were saying that the number of men that were showing grace was insanely high. Like,
I mean, and even my son lived with me for about 8 months. Well, actually, both of my sons lived with me at certain parts of their life. One for like a year and one for 8 months. And I really didn't stress it either. It was like, okay, my son would be now under my roof. I'm sorry?
You mean exclusively with you?
Yeah.
I just think it needs to be, we got to get as a community a conviction because, you know, the Bible talks about justice and mercy. None of us can seem to be able to be held under the weight of what we put on somebody else. You know, it's like, so when they
have ourselves on intent and others on behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that one of my greatest friends and speakers is Scott Davis. He always says that the way we do people is really often really dark and unrighteous. We want them to judge us on our intentions, but we want to judge them on their behavior, which he said a righteous person should judge themselves on their behavior and others on their intentions. Proverbs 29, I believe, says, a man or woman's heart is like deep waters, but only a man or woman of understanding can draw them out. And I think God takes great refuge in people who cares enough to sit together and talk. So, man, I'm going to wrap this up. Bro, I want to thank you so much. I think there is no better word than this is a civil rights issue. This is costing our nation greatly. America is not in the top 5, the top 10, top 15, top 20, top 25, and barely in the top 30 for being educated children around the world. And I think even though 8 out of 10 of the kids that got full scholarships in school had a present father, but 95% of all school dropouts, there's no father. I think there is a brutal connection for fatherlessness. What you are doing, 200 families in 8 years, that means on average you helped about 2 families get free a month. That's remarkable to me because there's a lot of work that goes into that stuff. You talking about how stuff could take 2 and 3 and 4 months for them, the brothers even get leeway. So for you to be averaging 2 a month, that means that's a running start that you're doing with these families. I think I would like to hear you say, I'm at 10 a month, 20 a month for what you're doing. So I encourage everybody that's listening, every brother, weareparents.org. This is Keno Stevenson. Am I saying that right, bro?
Yes.
Political science major. Morgan is a huge advocate for the family, not just for the men, not just for the women, but the family. I look forward to seeing if we can have you come back on maybe a little less time. I was thinking, man, this could be an easy half hour, but this was incredibly rich. Bro, thank you so much for what you're doing for our people.
And thank you for what you're doing, for getting the message out there about a lot of important topics that we need to know about. So I commend you as well, brother.
Yes, sir. We'll be talking more soon, bro.
All right, no doubt. Take care.
For sure.